So with that, say hello to Tim because he's in the room. Hi, Tim.
Hi.
And by way of introduction,
Oh, yes! Yes! Oh my God, it's actually flying! Yes! Yes! No way! No way! Thanks again for this.
Absolutely.
Man, I have to say, I've been IAC
It's so
2016, seeing, that was like, it was almost like awkward back then, because it was like,
I know.
you're insane. And now it's like, hey, look, I'm not insane.
Well, obviously insane, but
Let's see those landing legs! Yes! I saw the landing legs! Look at that! Yes! Oh, baby! Woo! They did it! Yes! Yeah! Yes! Water towers can fly!
so this is why we really love our everyday astronaut because I just don't know anyone who has the enthusiasm and in these times is doing more to really just excite people about space exploration, space discovery, space travel, space access, the future than you are, Tim. So we are so happy to have you join us here. Thank you for coming.
Well, it's honestly my pleasure. I'm excited to talk to people that I can ask questions to as well, because that's the way I learn best. And I've learned a lot just by watching you guys in the past, and even watching this evening. There's always so many little things that that easily miss my radar, because I'm not very tuned into astronomy as much as I am spaceflight, obviously. But yeah, it's still really exciting stuff, and they're of course tangentially related as well. So yeah, it's fun to be here with you guys.
They're cousins for sure. Astronomy lovers and space lovers. I mean, most astronomy lovers love space. Grew up with Star Trek, and so I think we're siblings from another mother. Is that how that phrase goes? But maybe we're not even cousins. We're brothers and sisters, all in this love of what's out there. So before we talk about some of the cool things that are going on, I just would like people to get to know a little bit about you. Would you tell us a little bit about yourself, how you got into this? How did you become the everyday astronaut?
Yeah, sure. My origin story is, I think, a little bit different, or maybe a little bit unique compared to, I guess, how most people would probably get into science communication. But I was originally a professional photographer from about 2008 until 2017. I did photography full time. And in 2013, at the end of 2013, as a joke, I happened to find an old Russian high altitude flight suit that looked, it's a orange spacesuit that looks a lot like the pumpkin suit from the space shuttle era. And for whatever reason, it kind of turned, I didn't even know what to do with it at first. And then I ended up at some point just kind of starting to take a photo series of myself in the spacesuit, all around these kind of like juxtaposition-y photos, and just kind of doing things that to me were kind of almost like this, at the time in 2013, 2014, representing my feelings about spaceflight, where there wasn't a lot to look forward to. You'd go down to Kennedy Space Center and you might see all these cool things that are, eventually we might get this to happen. Like constellation stuff was still out, even though Constellation Program had been canceled 5 years earlier. There were still constellation things all over, and it felt like this like graveyard of greatness, awesome things that had been. And I was using this photo series to almost represent this desire to get back out there and explore. And I was hiding a bunch of Easter eggs and history in all of these photos, and starting to learn along the way about how all this stuff works, really learning about rocket science, really learning about spaceflight history. And in the process of doing that, I just fell absolutely head over heels in love with everything. I mean, I did not know anything about spaceflight. I couldn't hardly tell you the difference between a space shuttle and a Saturn V in 2014. It just had no idea, and just absolutely fell in love with it. And it got to the point where I was trying to I wanted to teach people all these little things that I was learning, because I kept learning these little, like, just some random thing that would just blow my mind, and I'd be like, this is so cool. And I was trying to do that on Instagram, and Instagram just isn't the right platform for trying to teach someone a long form discussion about, expansion ratios or thrust to weight ratio or something like that. So instead, I was using, I decided at one point in 2017 I saw and felt like Everyday Astronaut was going to be able to do something if I just put more time into it and stop trying to do photography, even though photography was my career, my living. I quit. I decided in 2016 to stop booking for 2017, which is a really scary thing because I had no idea what I was going to do with Everyday Astronaut. But at the beginning of the year, I was just kind of throwing stuff at the wall, seeing what sticks, and made a couple YouTube videos, and they started to kind of, surprise me. Like they're outperforming at the time, what I felt like was a large Instagram following. And I was like, oh, maybe there's something to this. And I just kept going, and I just keep going. And there's so many things I'm excited to learn about myself and excited to teach. And I just have constantly awesome questions from community, from Twitter and from on YouTube about people asking me questions like, that'd be a great video. So I just literally put it in the list, and the list is ever growing, and I'm never catching up on it. And so I think I have some job security for the next who knows how long, because it's going to be a while for me to crank out all the videos. But
it's like the launch of JWST. It just keeps getting
it just keeps flipping to the right. But for me, that's a good thing.
That's an inside nerd joke there.
Yeah.
There are so many things we want to talk to you about, but as I suggested when we spoke earlier this week, Tony usually is our correspondent who covers space stuff. And so normally he'll just give a space report, might be 5 minutes long, 6 minutes long of, some of the latest stuff. But since we have you here, what we would like to do is have Tony do his thing, and then we'll have a little conversation. So there are a lot of different stories. I mean, what a busy week, and what a crazy week, what a busy and crazy month. And not only actual things that are igniting, but also announcements for some other things. So Tony, if you would, we'll kind of break it up a little bit rather than have it be just all solid. But I might interrupt you at points and ask Tim and anybody else who wants to join in. And
before we go to the PowerPoint, though, I actually have one thing that I just found out about, and I wonder if Tim has heard about this. That China has just launched a space plane very much like the X-37B, and apparently into the same orbit as the X-37B.
I saw that
this afternoon.
Yes, I saw that news item, and that is fascinating. I hope that we learn more about that, or whatever we can learn about it, because that's pretty crazy.
Yeah, and this has really been a crazy week. So I mean, we don't need to talk about like the year of what's been going on. Just the last few days, that so much has happened, and that's what I thought I'd touch on a few of these things, and then see what you have to say about them. So, okay, well, I'm ready for the PowerPoint.
All right, so go ahead, Tony.
Yeah, so at the end of Saturday, I believe this was, right? Or was it Sunday? A Rocket Lab, which I believe is an LA-based company, but they launched from New Zealand and I guess Virginia coming up pretty soon, succeeded in launching a satellite after a failure. So it was only like 50 days ago or something that they lost a rocket, but they turned around real quickly, found out what was wrong, and they're back in business. So this was a nice way to cap off that day, I thought.
Yeah. I mean, that was a really quick return to flight. And some of it is because, the Electron you can almost think of the Electron rocket as a digital rocket in a sense, because it's relatively simple hardware wise. It uses electric pumps to actually feed the rocket engine instead of complicated turbo pump machinery with tons of valves everywhere and all these crazy sensors everywhere. They basically just spin up a pump using a lithium-ion battery, and because of that, it's super wired, and they could easily read the data and go, oh, I guess this connector here went bad. They were able to replicate it in the lab, a condition they had never really seen before, and they're able to find and alleviate the fix really quickly within 2 months, which is a very quick return to flight. I mean, frankly, that's about the amount of time they normally have between launches anyway. So if you didn't even know when it had previously failed, you wouldn't really think much of the wait time there between those two flights.
This is a company that's also planning on reusing their rockets, right? At least the shell of the rocket.
Yeah, they're working on recovering their first stage of their booster, this is a very small rocket. It's only the whole thing's only 1.3 or 1.6 meters wide and 17 meters tall. So it's it's not a very large rocket. I think It's pretty lightweight. The first stage empty dry mass is only around 1 metric ton, so it's not a very big vehicle, period. And so their plan is to actually, they've been practicing getting it back from the atmosphere or from space. The first stage, of course, is on a suborbital trajectory, so it's not experiencing as much reentry heating. But the cool thing is, it comes back in, and they've actually been able to get it to go all the way through reentry and splash down, a hard splash down, of course, at first. But that's a really positive sign that they can at least survive that entry regime. And then soon on Flight 17, this was Flight 14, they will be releasing a parachute and then splashing it down, seeing how it looks. And eventually they're going to try and catch it with a helicopter, which is like the most Wile E. Coyote idea ever, but that still makes me really excited.
And then their company is devoted to launching small satellites, right? Or like Cubesats and things like that.
Yeah, within reach, price-wise too. I think they're not out of sight. What are the prices for a Cubesat to launch on Electron?
I think you can pretty much get a dedicated ride for about $5 million. And that's up to 225 kilograms for now, and they're doing a block upgrade that'll get you up to 300 kilograms. That's a very healthy size for modern day small sats. I mean, you could launch dozens of CubeSats with that amount of payload capacity. So that's actually quite cheap. And the cool thing is, they're really working on that cadence and a dedicated ride to exactly where your spacecraft needs to go. So that's kind of their selling point, is like they're the Uber versus like a bus. A bus will drop you off kind of where you need to go, but you still have to walk the rest of the way. An Uber can take you right to your doorstep.
Yeah.
It might be good just to set the context, because I always find this, especially for people who don't know a lot about space, that there are government players like NASA and ESA and the Chinese government and so forth, Russia. And then most have contractors who are private sector, but are, partners to the like Lockheed, Boeing, that sort of thing. But this whole new realm of commercial access that is not born of that model, but is completely an independent commercial market, it's almost hard to keep track of all the different ones. So I just want to kind of set that context. Maybe I'll chime in here and there to sort of position this. So this is comparatively low cost, low weight, small satellite launch services, but completely private company.
Yes.
So
very exciting to see their improvements. So shall we move on?
And then SpaceX has had a number of launches of their Starlink satellites. So this particular picture is of their SAOCOM B satellite, which was an Argentinian satellite. It's an Earth kind of observation satellite. And one of the unique things about it was launched from Florida, which isn't so unique, but it was launched going straight south. So it was in a polar orbit. Normally, we think of Vandenberg as our launch place for polar orbit satellites, but this was the first time since 1969 that SpaceX launched over Cuba, basically, to get a rocket into orbit. Do you know, is this a move away from using Vandenberg? I mean, why do that when they could have launched from Vandenberg, I suppose? Does it save money to do it from Florida?
I still don't know the exact for sure reason, but there's a lot of speculation about, that it likely is cheaper to launch from Florida because they could, that was booster 1060 and it already had flown once. So you wouldn't have to ship it across the country, or they just aren't doing as many operations out of Florida or Vandenberg these days. And I think some of it is, kind of like when we saw InSight launch from Vandenberg. That was kind of the opposite. It was the first interplanetary mission to launch from Vandenberg, going into a polar orbit and then going interplanetary. And it was that way because it was kind of cheaper and easier, and because it could. It could do it, so why not? And there's less range conflictions and all that stuff. And I think it's kind of the same type of thing. They can do it from Florida, so therefore it's actually just logistically easier and potentially therefore cheaper to do it from Florida.
We like them when they launch from Vandenberg because we can see them. Especially when it happens at sunset or just after sunset, you get those unbelievable. So some people watching who may remember some of the incredible sights of these crazy plumes of colors and light.
And I actually think it was the first, if I remember it, I think it was the first SAOCOM mission, SAOCOM 1A, that launched from Vandenberg that lit up the West Coast and made everyone think a giant squid UFO thing was going to be taking over and your new overlords, you know. And I'm pretty sure that was the first Satcom mission, if I remember right. But yeah, that launched from Vandenberg, and now the twin launched from Florida, which is very, very unusual.
Then the landing of this one was, I think the next slide actually was in Florida. I mean, at the Cape Canaveral, in a perfect landing on a pad there, rather than out in the ocean. So,
Yeah.
So since we're on SpaceX and Falcon 9 and their payloads, because we have some other bigger SpaceX stories in a little bit, but maybe this is a good time, Tim, to talk about one of the real market drivers from SpaceX point of view, which is their Starlink satellite constellation. And any one of us could probably just say it in general for the people who may not know what that is. Maybe Tim, could you just tell us very briefly what that is and why is SpaceX doing it?
Yeah, so SpaceX has just launched their 12th batch of around 60 satellites each launch. So we're over 700 of these satellites now in the sky, which I'm really excited to hear you guys' thoughts on. But the idea is, you know, if you cover the globe in satellites that are in low Earth orbit, they can offer low latency. So as opposed to, you know, satellites that are out in geostationary orbit, these are substantially closer to be able to have, you know, 50-second or very, very low latency, 50 milliseconds or less even sometimes, internet communications and high speed as well. You can have over 100 megabit for now, and they're working on gigabit connections as the constellation increases. And it will eventually be anywhere from 10,000 to 40,000 satellites, and they can intermesh and intercommunicate and basically take a signal from a ground station through the mesh of satellites and over to the other side of the world and be able to provide coverage literally anywhere around the world, even, you know, literally like in the middle of the ocean, the same high-speed internet or better internet that a lot of us have right now. So that's the eventual goal, and they're making really quick and steady progress towards getting there.
And they're pretty sophisticated satellites too. They have ion propulsion on them, and they shoot lasers to each other to transfer signals and stuff.
Well, I didn't put in the pew pew sound. But, so obviously the upside is, you know, internet communication, worldwide communication, and quite honestly, independent of certain environments that may want to control communications. If you can see a satellite, you can communicate to it. And if there's a huge constellation, I mean, you can see a satellite. So but the downside of a huge constellation is, and this going back to this picture from our pretty pictures, you know, there are a lot of them in the sky. This would have been shortly after launch. So you got a lot of them. They create these streaks. So I know, Tim, you were interested in talking to us about our opinion about this. Do you want to state the question? And I think David has some strong opinion, well, a lot of knowledge about it for sure, and perhaps an opinion or two.
Yeah, I'm really excited to ask questions about this because, you know, I've obviously done a handful of my own just astrophotography as a complete hobbyist, and I am fully aware that there's potentially a huge impact that the astronomy community is greatly concerned about. I know from my side of things as a photographer, you know, I know how I can remove pixels, repeated or unwanted pixels, you know, by negative stacking an image as opposed to positive stacking, and also how the, you know, satellites like this are most visible for about, you know, 90 minutes or so before sunrise and after sunset, because that's when they're reflective. And I know that SpaceX is making some progress towards adding sunshades, reducing the glare, and even changing the angle on the satellites so that they hopefully are significantly lower magnitude. And it seems like they're getting down to around 7. But I'm curious, what impact does it actually have on ground-based observations, radio and optical, you know, and visible light? And yeah, what you know, because this picture I think is about the worst case scenario, I would assume, where, you know, it's showing you what it could look like under the absolute worst case conditions, and that our naked eye would never really see it like that. But is this what the concern? Is this the same concern as, you know, if you're doing ground-based observations here on Earth?
Kind of. The image that we're showing here actually is the worst case These are multiple exposures. Absolutely, you could remove those satellite trails. This was done for effect to show, look at what's crossing here. So this was definitely an image done for effect. But astronomical research from the ground, we need to remember, astronomers, we're not looking at things that are naked eye. Those have been looked at. We're investing millions of dollars, if not hundreds of $1,000,000 in cutting edge observatory equipment. I regularly look at things that are between 1,000,000 and 100,000,000 times fainter than magnitude 7. Magnitude 7 you can't see, but it's going to leave streaks behind that even after I remove them, they will still be there in the data at the level of the things I'm trying to study. So 7 the magnitude's not good enough if you've got hundreds of these things crossing the sky at once. And those are the sort of estimates that we have, is that, like you said, for the first 90 minutes after sunset, there will literally be hundreds of these visible for about 30 degrees up. Straight up, you won't really see them nearly as much because there's not much sunlight there, of course. Late in the night, through the middle portions of the night, the middle 6 hours or so, that you won't see very many either. But for the first 90 minutes or so, the last 90 minutes for many of the observatories, it's going to be very bad. Now, folks will say, why do you care about twilight? That's not such a big deal. We actually do a lot of calibrations during twilight. You want that even glow of the sky because you want to calibrate the sensitivity of your chips. We do very careful sensitivity calibrations of the pixels to be able to get the finest analysis out of what we're doing. And if you've got hundreds of satellites crossing that technique is not going to work any longer. We will have to go to other things, and we'll find tricks, we'll find ways around it. But the shade isn't working quite as well. I know there are some other things they want to do, but it really seems like they came up with a system that would work. It's at low Earth orbit. You could put higher power, more expensive satellites higher up, and they would not be ruining the night sky for astrophotography and for research from the ground. Well, making it harder. I won't really say ruining, but making it much, much harder for us to do. So it seems like this idea was thought forward. There's nobody really in charge of the night sky. There's nobody that says, let's preserve what humanity has had. And a big problem is people live in cities, so they don't even look up and they don't see it. So a huge number of people aren't going to care anyway. So
ruined for them already almost.
Yeah, exactly. So, but I do applaud Elon Musk for trying, for wanting to work with astronomers. He's attempting things. This first attempt looks like you said, about 7th magnitude, which is better. Absolutely, it's a step in the right direction. And I know that if we keep giving him more feedback, and the sun shades, I think, are a very interesting idea rather than just the dark coating, because that was the dark sat, the one they coated with a dark coating. But the idea of a sunshade that would prevent the glints off of solar panels or anything like that, because they are seeing spikes that are getting up to a magnitude 2, magnitude 1. They don't happen often. It's a bright little flash. And then they'll go back down to magnitude 6 and 7. But they're working with us. Internet for the world is very powerful, getting it beyond, putting it out there where everybody can access the information that's there. So I see both sides of the argument, but I do worry about, running ahead. We've built all these cities with bright lights, and people didn't stop to think, what are we doing to the night sky? And what are we doing to our sleep cycles? And what are we doing to the environment? And those questions are being asked now. Well, I hope we start thinking about it for my little kitty here crossing. Just to think about that too. Anyway, it's a great question, Tim. I'm so glad you brought it up. And I love these rocket launches. They're so much fun to see. And then you think, oh my gosh, there goes another 60 Starlinks, and I'm torn because the launch is beautiful and exciting.
It seems to me that you could. Elon Musk has a lot of resources, and he has a voice and he has the ear of the public. So maybe I have thoughts of 2 things he could do to help mitigate it, because I too am quite persuaded by the importance of globally available internet. But one is, space astronomy. It's not a lot of space telescopes. You don't have to send up a Hubble size. There's a lot you can do with just because of being out of the Earth's environment, and so you can compensate for that if you have specially dedicated missions. We schedule around bright moonlight. We schedule around clouds and weather patterns. Sometimes, hour by hour. We are used to it as astronomers. They have to deal with sky conditions. But one way is to simply not have to deal with the sky at all if you just are out there. The other thought I had, and David, I want your comment, but I'm just going to pop two out there because I am a very dedicated and passionate about dark sky preservation as someone who used to do a lot of wilderness experience. And so, you know, that could make a huge difference. In other words, the damage that might be happening for certain sectors, astrophotographers, professional astronomers, you know, you could offset to some degree in a through a public service way of helping to reduce light pollution, and so much of that is simply through education. I mean, reducing light pollution is so easy and so economically beneficial and environmentally beneficial. I mean, there's just no reason we need to be sending all those fossil fuel products into the atmosphere to light up car dealerships, you know, and he's sort of that ilk anyway with the solar energy and the Powerwall and Solar City and so forth. But he could help to change that global consciousness about the way in which we relate to the night sky and help to bring back the night sky to billions of people with the platform that he has. So those were just two thoughts. Next time you see Elon, tell him, hey.
Yeah.
David, you didn't like one of my thoughts there, or Tony, you look, sorry, I'll listen. What
right. Well, I was going to comment on the idea of the space telescopes. I love space telescopes. Of course, you get wonderful resolution. You're above the atmosphere, all sorts of benefits. But the cost of the JWST, James Webb, is about 10 billion. It's a 6.5 meter telescope. The 30 meter telescope that's being built is estimated to be about 2.5 billion. So you're talking about an aperture that's 5 times wider, the ability to go much, much fainter, the ability to get spectra of the initial galaxies being formed. The Webb will be able to get those images. It's in there, but it's not going to be able to get spectra of those initial galaxies easily. You would have to expose so much longer. So really, the power of astronomy is the ground-based telescopes that can be enormous. You can't get those into space. Working with the space-based ones that can be above the atmosphere and get the clarity. So the two working together are important. And then also students, the notion of students, and we saw Lick Observatory earlier tonight, that 40-inch telescope Tony mentioned, that's where we're training folks, and we're training them to do research, and they're going out there, they're doing great work. The 3 meter is also a wonderful instrument. People do all sorts of work on it. Those are workhorses that we want to keep using and we want to keep getting stuff out of. And it's getting harder and harder with the light pollution. But I like, Laura, I like your idea. If Elon can tackle some light pollution for us, I don't know. I might take some Starlink. I might learn how to remove some with software if we can get darker skies.
Well, and after Hubble failed, of course, the advances in software that were the result of trying to deconvolve those images led to tremendous economic opportunities and ramifications. I mean, you could buy, 30 Hubbles for the money made in medical imaging, and I mean, there's just a lot of spin-offs there. But now I was thinking, earlier I was thinking of imaging. David is primarily imaging photometry. I'm primarily spectroscopy from our research labs.
No, I'm Spectra too. I was the first person to get Spectra of red giants and M31.
Oh, okay.
That's my thesis.
I was going to do a ground-based versus space-based because I cut my teeth on IUE. And, it was a little telescope. It did a lot. And boy, what you could do with 30 IUE class telescopes, spectroscopically speaking, that were dedicated for time. Anyway, I don't want to, actually, I kind of do want to dive into it, but in the interest of not killing everybody. But I think there are mitigating possibilities. Tony, you look like you were going to say something.
Yeah, I'll just tell you, as more of a, I like going out and looking at the sky, not necessarily to do great scientific work. I mean, I do sometimes, but really I just find looking at a dark sky, like from the Grand Canyon or Australia, is just one of the most thrilling, soul-thrilling things you can see. And to have people-made stuff crawling all over it is actually depressing to me. There's light pollution, but Starlink and giant satellite constellations is literally something you can't get away from if you're viewing from the Earth. Now, obviously, as David was saying, certain times of night, it's not a problem because the satellites are in shadow. But at least for visible astronomy, we didn't talk about radar, radio, or those things yet. But I also understand that actually Starlink isn't what astronomers are most worried about, because there's other satellite constellations that are supposed to be placed in higher orbits that will be illuminated much more of the night, and they're bigger satellites. So they could be much more problematic, too, than even Starlink.
I know Amazon is planning one. There are others.
Yeah.
And that leads us into a discussion of space junk, which is a whole different set of problems, having nothing to do with the way it looks in the night sky and having everything to do with making it low Earth orbit a non-usable resource. So that's problematic. Do you have thoughts about that, Tim?
Yeah, well, so just even to Tony's note, I'm with you about, the night sky being something that, I'll go out and camp, in Utah and, get into the darkest regions I can find just to be able to just stare at the night sky. That's something that, and Iowa's pretty great here. I live in Iowa, I can go 30 miles away from the town, 50 kilometers away from the town that I live in, and be in some pretty dark skies here. I'm quite fortunate in that. And I grew up with that. I grew up, going out to my grandparents' farms every summer and just would sit and just look at stars. So that's a part of me and my curiosity, I guess. But oddly, unlike Tony, I almost have the opposite effect when I catch a satellite in the sky. And this was even before I knew that there were satellites. Like, I remember out at my grandparents' farm, I happened to catch and saw in the news later that it was the International Space Station and the space shuttle catching up to it, at dusk. And I saw it go all the way across the sky. And I was like, that is the coolest thing I've ever seen in my life. I had no idea what it was, and happened to learn later that night then that it was, the ISS and the space shuttle. And something about that just made me, the hair stand up on my neck and just go, that's incredible that humans can do that, And so there's still something when I do catch a satellite, because I've actually gone out looking for Starlink multiple times and haven't been able to see the train or any of them really per se. And when I do catch one, I personally get excited, but I know that that's not the that could probably pretty soon not be the reaction for most people. But at the same time, to the space telescope note, Elon had mentioned years ago, even as this was first becoming a topic, he mentioned that they do hope at some point to be able to have a connectable bus to be able to put some kind of, satellites or observation, scopes and stuff on the Starlink constellation and be able to return some of that back to the community. And I wonder, even from you guys, what was the experiment that they successfully did last year, where they basically used the whole Earth as an aperture using multiple satellites? What was that?
Yeah. That was the Event Horizon Telescope, where they got the image of the black hole. It took incredibly fast computers analyzing or recording the data and time encoding it, and then they were able to recombine it as though it was a live combination happening, with the waves all coming in together afterwards to make that image. So indeed, interferometry in space is a very exciting topic. So you're totally right you hit the nail on the head with that one. Absolutely.
I wonder what we could do if we had, at any point, 10,000 of these satellites looking at the same thing at the same time, what kind of resolution you could get, even with a relatively small diameter, or small aperture on a scope, combining all those forces for good, and seeing what something like that would be like. Of course, that's me being like, yay, everything's fine, and this is not something that I deal with every day, obviously. But I do wonder what in the future, if there's just going to be this convergent point where right now it's like, this is definitely affecting us, but if in the near future, some of the impact could end up being positive or
I think for photographers especially, actually a lot of amateur astronomers now don't only use their own telescopes. They'll log on to remote telescopes around the world to take their pictures. And I know some of the upcoming companies that are, commercial companies are making telescopes that you could download your specified image on your phone. You pay them several $100s or something, but you get the data sent to your cell phone, and then you can process the image. It's yours, So,
right.
So I think there's going to be opportunities certainly with space instruments, and if Elon Musk is willing to help get into that would satisfy the photographers, I'm sure.
I'm moved. I mean, one of the thoughts I have is, okay, you want to have a see a really dark sky, let's get to those moon bases already. And so it is a constant, I think, tug between, pushing into the future and wanting to hold on to the values and the best parts of the past. And it's never a smooth, from cat to dog. That's Dumbledore. Tim, meet Dumbledore.
He's adorable.
Yeah, he's a good dog. It's never planned. It's never a smooth road. And so, 2 steps back, 3 steps forward, 4 steps back, 2 steps forward, it's hard to, I don't know what to say about the aesthetic piece. I think that's why I care so much about bringing down the city and, the environment, because it's great if you live, most of our population doesn't live in an area that they can go to or until you take them out and they see the stars, they don't even know they're there, and don't even know what they're missing. So there's a real set of trades about who gets these benefits, and that's a very profound sociological issue, I think.
Well, you're absolutely right. I didn't realize this until I personally experienced it. And maybe this is totally a like my own just experience that I had once, and therefore I apply it widely. But I always assumed looking at the night sky was just innate. I thought that was part of human nature. If you live in somewhere dark and you can see the stars, I assumed you just naturally just want to stare up at the sky. I ended up spending about 2 weeks at an orphanage in a very rural place in Myanmar, and I brought my spacesuit with me. There's only about 2 people there that could kind of speak, fairly broken English, but they, we could communicate. And then I was just amongst a handful, 24 or so orphans, and they were so excited to be there, to be able to speak English or have someone speaking English with them, just practicing, counting and things like that, because to them that was a big value. But of course I was teaching them a lot about, or trying to teach them about space the best I could through, visual representations and drawings and, doing all that stuff. And as I was leaving, one of the last nights I was leaving, I shot this little film while I was there, and it required the help of some of the teachers there. And one of this kid, he's probably 20 years old or something, told me, he goes, I had never looked up at the night sky before. And he's like, it was fascinating. And he's like, I love it now. And I'm very excited. And that floored me. That absolutely floored me, that was one of the most beautiful night skies I've ever seen in my entire life, because of how dark and remote it was. And I just had no idea that it wasn't, that it's not really ingrained in us. And it is something that we need to teach, and socially, there's a social responsibility about getting people excited about looking up at the night sky and appreciating it. And this is totally off topic now, I think, at this point, but it is a weird thing that happened to me that I think some of that kind of stuff as we move forward will help, just even evangelicalize, if you will, for people to actually enjoy the night sky as well. Just sort of an anecdote there for you guys.
Well, it changes. I mean, it's a cliche, but it changes your perspective. It does. And makes you feel large and small at the same time, both of which are needed, I think this is a good time to move forward on a few other space topics, because I'm looking at the clock. We're going to run past 10, which means it's past midnight to you. I hope that's okay.
That's okay. I'm tend to be a night owl anyway.
Oh, so do I. So I think, look who you're talking to. But anyway, so we know we have an audience, but hey, you can always, put it on your tablet and take your tablet to bed with you and fall asleep to the dulcet tones of our conversation. So I'm going to come back to where we left off, which was this image of the landing. And I think we should just go through and touch on a few other things, big things that happened this week. And then I have a couple more questions I want to ask you, Tim, before we say goodnight. Okay, so what's this all about?
Okay, so we got an announcement of the first crew mission for the first, what's it called, crew mission 1 for Dragon capsule. Of course, we have the test mission that ended last month, but now we have one upcoming in no earlier than the end of October, it looks like. So that'll be the first crew mission for Dragon. So looks like it's coming along. Now, is that date probably because they have to schedule other spacecraft that are visiting the space station, and that's just when it fits in?
Yeah, the ins and outs of the International Space Station is a complicated beast. Even having which vehicles are docked to what node and what port, they have to synchronize it all in arriving vehicles. It's a whole little ballet there, and then also just the making sure they had time to fully review the demonstration mission and make sure that the Dragon capsule performed exactly as planned. And it, from all accounts, it seems like it surely did, and that's fantastic news because it's about time that we make this more of a normal thing again.
And it was the Bob and Doug show. I do want to ask, Patrick and I had some conversations with some of our staff this week about the future of ISS after NASA ceases to fund it or reduces its, in some future, not so distant future scenario of it being rolled over into other uses and opportunities for private investment and usage. Do you have any thoughts about that? Any insight? What do you prognosticate? Where will we be, say, in 2025?
It really pains me to say that I think we can do better than the International Space Station. There's so much science on board that it'd be an absolute shame to throw it away. But meanwhile, I hope that we can find some kind of convergence to be able to, dock some kind of new space station or new module to it, offload some of the important science instruments that are extremely expensive and, performing well. But the whole thing as a whole is it's a constant work. Basically, they're spending more time up there keeping it from breaking than doing science on board. And I would love to see a more 21st century space station soon. So I don't want to be too much of a sunk cost fallacy saying, we need to absolutely keep it alive at all costs and just continually pour and reinvest into it when maybe we're, could be doing something a little bit more agile or something in the future. So I could see it being phased out and hopefully and doing so responsibly. And who knows, maybe by then, by the time it's ready to really be phased out and deorbited, there could be vehicles that could be capable of going up and taking some of the cooler pieces from it, maybe the cupola and putting it in the Smithsonian or something.
Do you see a role for rolling it over into some private activities? Or do you think it's just cleaner and easier and better to
I think it's really not that well suited for commercial activities because it's just stuffed to the gills. It's mostly a giant laboratory. There's very little creature comforts. If someone's going to be spending $50 million on a ticket to space and hoping to get this beautiful view of Earth, the International Space Station likely isn't going to be the best opportunity in the long term, but for now it's the best we have, obviously, but it's just not really designed for that. So I hope the commercial enterprise ends up with a better option for commercial stuff. That's my opinion.
Yeah, I think the inflatable Bigelow modules and things like that are really interesting opportunity for commercial, in my opinion.
Absolutely. Yeah. Or at this rate, even if Starship makes it to orbit at some point, just park one up there and just keep it up there because that's 1,000 cubic meters of habitable volume that could really be just a one-stop space station in one launch.
So much history here because there were some very vocal people pushing for that with the external tank for the space shuttle.
Yes.
You lose your solid rocket boosters, but there's this huge external tank and it was almost in orbit anyway.
Yeah.
You just set it up there, line it with an inflatable or liner, and have a hotel. It just was killing people that was not the direction that went. There's a lot of really interesting history about how that all developed.
I know that would have been alternate space history. I would have loved to see happen.
Ooh, that was a fun idea. So I'm gonna just keep moving forward. And Tony, you want to talk about the other?
Okay, and I can't read the screen, but this is the Boeing Starliner. Yeah. So Starliner, which if you've followed, we know had a test flight, an uncrewed test flight to the space station, which had actually failed because of software problems. It didn't get into the orbit of the space station, and then it had a number of near disasters, I guess, and even getting back to the ground. Now, it did land safely. If a crew had been on board, they would have been fine, but it really wasn't the way the test was supposed to go. So as a result, Boeing now says and NASA agrees that they should be ready for a flight by the end of the year to repeat that test mission and hopefully get a better grade on it this time.
Yes. Yeah, we need that. It is a shame. I mean, we want what's best. We want these things to go well, and seeing it not perform was heartbreaking. But I'm really glad that Boeing stepped up and is reflying it completely before putting humans on.
Because we don't want to just depend on one craft to get people there. Now, also in talking about scheduling things for the space station, I saw Anatoly Zak, who reports on Russian space news, reported that the Russians apparently have scheduled a time for Dream Chaser to dock with the space station. Dream Chaser is an American cargo winged spacecraft that will carry cargo, since SpaceX actually does not have a dedicated cargo craft anymore for the space station. They don't build that anymore. So Dream Chaser will take that place. But NASA has not announced a first flight for this, as far as I know. But the Russians apparently are working with NASA and all, and they have to make room for it. So the Russians have let it slip that they have a slot for Dream Chaser sometime towards the end of next year.
Huh.
So,
I missed that one. And just to be clear, SpaceX no longer has the Dragon 1 capsule, but they are actually flying a crew variation or a cargo variation of Dragon 2 for these new rounds of cargo resupply. So Sierra Nevada is actually a new third supplier, which is really exciting. There's them and then the Northrop Grumman's Cygnus capsule. I think Cygnus still has the contract, I'm pretty sure. Yeah.
I imagine with Dream Chaser, you can return it more at will, where the crew capsules have to wait till the crew's ready to come back. So it's up on the space station for months, but you could, in between times, have other cargo.
Well, I mean, they will have totally uncrewed Dragon 2 capsules, actually, that are still just cargo variants. Will likely just be basically stripped down of their abort motors and the life support systems.
So again, for those who may not be familiar, it was a big darn deal when SpaceX started taking cargo up to the International Space Station for this very reason. It isn't a government, it wasn't a government partner like Lockheed Martin or Northrop Grumman, a completely independent company. And I thought when we saw Bob and Doug coming back from the International Space Station, it wasn't the U.S. Navy that was out there getting them, it was SpaceX. It's kind of an interesting thing. So when they did that was a milestone. Then when they got crew up there just this past summer, another major milestone. So now it's these other companies. I mean, it's really evolving where that's, we'll leave the cargo thing to the other up and comers. I mean, which is how it should be, pushing forward and building that market. So it's kind of great.
Mm-hmm.
Blue Origin has delivered a full mock-up of the national or team, what's it called, the National Team Lander?
Yeah, national, I think just National Lander. Yeah.
National Lander, yeah. For the Artemis program, for the program of NASA, to get astronauts back to the moon. So this was just given to NASA so the astronauts can start practicing with it.
And if I may, I'm sorry, I'm just going to do this again. Blue Origin is yet another one of these new companies. This one is Jeff Bezos's. So Elon Musk with SpaceX and Jeff Bezos.
And actually, he made a combination of companies. So he's making the bottom part of it, and then Northrop Grumman and Lockheed are making the other sections of this, if I recall correctly.
Yep.
So it's a joint commercial venture.
And it's crazy to see. It is big. This is way bigger than the Apollo program. That's a video that I'm not done yet still, but I'm comparing the Apollo program to the Artemis program. And we get a little bit into the landers, and boy, are they substantially different. Yeah.
And this has been a whole other model that's breaking the mold, rather than, again, soup to nuts, NASA, but to work with private companies this way who develop their own landers. And so Tony also mentioned the Artemis program, which is the current NASA program to return astronauts, as they like to say, the first woman and another man to the moon by 2024. So here's an artist's conception of that lander on the moon with the Earth in the distance. So Tim, I got to ask you, is there a chance in heck that we'll get there and land astronauts in 2024, in your opinion?
Well, I personally don't see 2024 happening, but aiming at 2024 is a great idea because it's always been 10 years away, and 10 years away is just, you might as well say never. We've been doing that for 50 years now, just saying, yeah, in 10 years, we'll have this new thing. So by making it only 5 years away and trying to actually align to that, you actually have a really decent chance of success. A lot of checks have been written. I could actually see it happening. Again, I'm about a 3% chance of it happening in 2024. But I am more like 50% chance of seeing humans on the moon again in 2025, and increased confidence more like 90% by 2026. And to me, that's just fantastic.
Can we make a bet? We got to do one of those bets with, I don't know, a bottle of fine scotch or something, because I'll take you on that one.
What are your guys' thoughts? I want to know everyone's over under, I guess. 2024, is it happening?
Yeah, I agree. I don't think 2024, but maybe 2025. So I agree with you, Tim. I think you're about right.
Okay, it's all about to everybody. I think you guys are coconuts. I think it's not going to happen.
Yeah. Well, I'm excited to know that NASA's actually put a date on getting to Mars now. They always used to say 30 years, 30 years, 30 years, as opposed to the 10 years with the moon. They actually now have a date, and it is in the 2030s, and it's not. They're aiming at that. They have a date to work towards, as opposed to it's off in the future. We'll get there. So NASA's changing their attitude from what we've been seeing over the last 30 years. So fingers crossed that's my hope.
In my opinion, the parallel with Apollo is that, they set a goal, and by God, they were going to make that goal. I mean, the reputation of the United States relied on it. And we had some of the engineers who worked on Apollo visit the observatory, do a couple programs. For those watching on YouTube, they're on our YouTube channel. It was very moving to hear these guys talk about the way in which one of them, Jerry Elverum, said there was no way we weren't going to get a man on the moon by the end of the decade. It just was not. It was your patriotic duty. So I feel similarly to what you're saying, David. If 2030 is a real thing and you have a plan to get there, but I really find it demoralizing to say we're going to set a date, but nobody knows it. I think that is not a good way to go from a project management standpoint, because then why would you ever believe your leaders again? If you're telling everyone, plus I'm sorry, I'm just going to go there. This culture where I don't really mean what I say, I can say anything and it doesn't. I mean, I kind of grew up, I'm the youngest of a large family. I have parents from the greatest generation. That was not the way you did things. Your word is your bond. So I have a real problem with that. And maybe that leads to my cynicism about our ability to get it done. Because, with all the management upheavals and they're not over, I find it difficult to build a team that knows where solid ground is in such a circumstance.
Would you say it isn't dead, though? I mean, I think we're kind of surprised it's actually still going as strong as it is, maybe, right? Because, I mean, normally these things get announced and then by a year and a half later you forget about it because there's no momentum. But this one, the stuff is actually being built, and it's given a direction to things that have been around for a long time, but just not making goals and well, it'll be like our next topic I'm going to talk about. In fact, why don't we go on to that, because it's really part of the same thing. Okay, well, first of all, the Orion spacecraft, which has flown once, launched by a Delta IV, but the first mission to the moon, Artemis 1, is supposed to be launched by 2021. So some news this week was that the capsule apparently has been certified for that. I mean, it looks like it's on track for making that flight. That's good. Now, this one won't carry a crew, but it will be sort of like an Apollo 8 mission where it goes around the moon and I think does some other maneuvering and then comes back to Earth. But a lot of this depends on the rocket that's supposed to carry it, right? So the SLS, the Space Launch System, which is really, it's kind of a relic from the Constellation program, because its big rocket, the Ares, was canceled. But some of the technology of that, which grew out of the space shuttle, actually was salvaged. So it's been kind of a congressionally mandated rocket. The U.S. will build this rocket so we can do something even though we can't decide what it is sometime in the future. But it is sort of a flexible design. It's designed to be bigger and bigger so you can go farther and farther with it. And here we see what it would look like on the first Artemis mission with the Orion capsule on the top. It has a big orange tank, kind of like the space shuttle. It has modified versions of the space shuttle solid rocket boosters, and it has modified versions of the space shuttle engines on the bottom of it. But this has been going on. When did this came out? I think in 2007 or something. After Constellation was canceled, I think SLS was ended.
The first date it actually got drawn up and accepted as the path forward after Constellation was I think 2011 actually, but it was flying 2017 was the original.
17 was the first flight, right?
Right. Yeah. And so it's been going along, and it's been budget running higher and higher, which I'll have a little bit about too. But the main thing is that pieces of this now actually are being built, and they are running into critical tests now. So there will be a test coming up soon of, I guess, a firing of all the main engines. I think it's called a green test or something. Maybe you know more about that.
Yeah. Basically, static fire, like how SpaceX does it, but this time with a huge mega rocket. Yeah.
Yeah, and I saw just this week those rockets have now been assembled and stuff, so it looks like that's ready to go. And then the solid rocket boosters had a spectacular test a couple days ago, and we'll see part of that.
And I, it did have the pressurization test last year and went vertical at Stennis and had some successes. So there have been successes, but it's just been a really long, rocky road. But yes, so the solid rocket, this is cool.
5, 4, 3, 2, 1, fire. T plus 5 seconds. T plus 10 seconds.
Yeah, that for 2 minutes.
We cut it.
Oh, good. I was gonna say.
And they had a fire suppression system, and it was so hot that it melted. It turned the sand into glass, and also we didn't show it here, but it also ignited the hillsides on fire. Kind of exciting, but anyway, so that apparently went well. In fact, it went better than the last test, because the last test, I know a segment fell off after the test officially ended, but it looked like it didn't go so well. I mean, I guess they achieved the goal they wanted, but it looked bad. This one looked very nice. So things are going, it is developing, and the goal is to keep Artemis on track. It has to launch that first mission in 2021, is to get people to the moon. But there was also some other news this week that the Office of Management and Budget had warned us about this a few months ago, but now it's confirmed that the cost of that first flight is going to be 30% higher than what NASA was budgeting on. So the budget next year will have to cover a much more expensive rocket to keep it on track. So I guess we'll have to stay tuned to see how that goes over.
Yeah. Well, and it sounds like that will require additional congressional has to get approval actually to continue going. So depending on the political climate next year, that whenever that happens, I mean, that could actually be a scary thing for the program, because 30% is nothing to sneeze at,
Yeah. So I've noticed there's been a lot of positive news about SLS this week, but this also came in, and I wondered if it was maybe so people noticed that much. I don't know.
Right. Yeah.
I see there's a slide in here. There's one more, and I don't know what it is, but it looks like it could be a movie. Is that right, Tony?
It's going to be a launch of some kind of government surveillance satellite using the biggest rocket we currently have, right? The Delta IV Heavy, and it didn't go quite the way that we thought it would. So
again, for our viewers, you'll see someone very familiar looking in the corner. And before we show this, let me just say, Tim, is there any launch you don't? I mean, do you basically bring us all the launches?
I really, my thing is I try not to do launches that I don't know a decent amount about. I want to be able to, easily talk about the vehicle and the mission, kind of off the top of my head. So I still have never really even done like a Soyuz launch. For some reason, I just have never covered Soyuz, which is sad because, humans are some awesome missions. There's some ESA launches I haven't done, and but for the most part, like any of the launches I'm familiar with, most of the U.S. companies I'm very familiar with. So I try to do as many of them as I can, and sometimes like this week, it was like I was on air I think 10 times throughout the past week. It was a lot.
So great. Anything you want to say about this Delta IV? I mean, obviously something happens and we'll show it.
See, I was actually watching the feed from ULA, the United Launch Alliance, and I panicked when I saw it wasn't launching. I thought, oh no, it's going to explode. Now, I then watched your feed, your coverage of it, and, it looked like you were right in on what was going on. And so I thought,
let's watch it and then we'll comment after.
Voice of reason on this.
Yeah.
So get ready. We will see on the right, the feed will go probably around T-minus 15 to 20 seconds. We'll see the feed on the right. Mary Liz and Ryan's Cosmic Perspective feed will be ahead of the official broadcast on the left.
Second stage LH2 secure at flight level.
So just get ready. So we'll likely see it go on fire
Minus
on
30.
the right camera
Status
here
check. Go Delta. Go NROL 44.
probably in about the next 5 seconds. We should see it light itself on fire on the right camera. Here we go. Yes! Yes! There we go.
15. Roll for ignition.
And
9, 8,
oh,
7,
I think it
6,
aborted. It aborted.
5,
Whoa!
3, 2,
No!
and liftoff.
No!
And lip.
Crickets. Literal crickets. No.
And stand by. We've obviously had a hot fire abort.
No.
So the lesson here is if you want to watch a launch and know what to do and what's going on, go to the Everyday Astronaut because he's got you covered.
Get the early feed like that.
So we actually have our friends are shooting with a large telescope, a large 10-inch. Oh man, I don't remember what it is now. Like an LX. What's the LX series?
Well,
There's a bunch of them.
Yeah, LX 200 or something, 10-inch or something like that. Yeah, and they're from Cosmic Perspective is their company, and they're do incredible filming and live streams as well. So they are actually piping us a direct feed via RTMP, and we can actually pull it up in our feed, and so therefore it doesn't have to go through YouTube, and get delayed. So we actually only have about a 2-second delay between real time and them, and then the YouTube feed's about 15 to 20 seconds delayed. So our feed is actually earlier, and this was actually the first time we really did it, and it turned out to be a really good thing for this particular mission because we could tell before the broadcast hit our face even that they had aborted.
Yeah.
Interesting. Yeah. Mary Liz and Ryan are actually friends of mine from Burning Man. You can see the image behind me. They're part of the Black Rock Observatory. They've been there for several years. So
Yes.
It's awesome that you know them as well. They're incredibly talented, and that's so exciting that they're bringing you those images. Now I know where I can find their stuff. I can find it on your channel.
They are some of my favorite people, and we started working together earlier this year when I had this crazy idea to try to do a tracking telescope for launch. I started talking to OPT telescopes. This guy named Scott Ferguson has this tracking software that he developed, and then talked to Mary Liz and Ryan because I don't live in Florida. They do. So we started working together on like, hey, why don't you guys run this now? Because I can't always be down there. I just want this to be used. Like we have this awesome telescope. Let's put it to good use. And they're putting it to the best use, and they are doing some awesome things. So it's been really, really, really cool to see that happening.
That's really fun.
So I have to ask, any stories from something blowing up that you've been? We showed that video earlier of you. Oh yes, yay, hooray! But have you had some catastrophic moments on air?
I've almost never been on air during almost any kind of failure, believe it or not. I was on air for Rocket Lab's failure, and that was very anticlimactic. We just kind of saw the telemetry going down. We're like, oh, that's not right. It's nothing spectacular. The closest thing to that, I had another film crew, Rachel and Jean, from their surfers on South Padre Island now are space nuts. And I've been teaching them how to shoot and gave them one of my cameras, and they've been shooting footage of the Starship stuff for me now. They were at that, it was serial number 4 prototype that just went completely kaboom.
So they filmed that, but I wasn't even live streaming that at the time because I was preparing. That was DM1 or DM2 was happening all during that same time. Oh, the closest thing, I was there when Starhopper had this like a hose pop off or something as it was about to do a launch, and it lit itself completely on fire. And we almost, we're sitting there going, did we just watch it blow up? And we're only a mile and a half away, and we're like, are we going to feel a shockwave or something? And luckily all we heard was a gentle little thing. We're like, okay, so it's not high energy. And then we see it and we're like, oh, it seems to be fine. So I know I haven't actually really witnessed or even hardly been a part of any substantial failure, luckily, because that's always not a good thing.
I was going to say, now we know, it's lucky talisman. And on the flip side, do you have a favorite? I mean, I got to say, you on that Starhopper was kind of, seemed like you were over the moon to kind of use it.
I've got different favorites for different reasons almost. Any of those the Starhopper first one when it really, really flew, not just there's one that did a little tiny hop at night. We barely saw it. The first 150 meter hop of Starhopper, there's something that kind of broke in my head because, you can drive right up to it. So you see this stout, like heavy water towery thing, and there's an engine right there, and you kind of know what it's going to do. But then when you're staring at it for days and days, weeks for me, I was out there for weeks looking at this thing, and then all of a sudden you see it just fly around. Like there's a disconnect, and my brain just was like, this is not happening. How is this happening? But as far as launches, the first Falcon Heavy demo mission was incredible. Seeing the two boosters return to land was like, I couldn't even believe it. I mean, and seeing it fly, and it did a turn, a roll, an orientation roll relatively early in the flight, and it looked way closer and way bigger in real life than it does in the cameras. And it's like, is it supposed to be rolling? Is that okay? And it was insane. But believe it or not, one of my favorite missions and one of my favorite memories from a mission was EFT-1, a Delta IV Heavy, in December of 2014, like you were saying, Tony, for the Orion capsule. And that was actually one of my favorite missions. It was one of the first times I was really out there at the launch site, just really kind of, having to wake up at really weird hours, trying to catch this thing, having to run cameras everywhere, just working my butt off. And then it was just this gorgeous launch. And that will always be with me as just this, kind of the start of that reward of, look at that go, and it wasn't quite as like mind blowing, but rewarding and thrilling and just beautiful. Cause that is a big, beautiful rocket to see fly too.
I have to say, oh, go ahead, Tony.
Oh, I'm sorry. This, looking at what's coming up in the next, say, month or two, it looks like Boca Chica could break our heads again, right? Can you go over some of the things we're expecting to see?
I'd like to ask that, but I do want to make a quick comment because I'm moved by your description of that, and you make me think of my first launch. I guess that sounds kind of funny. And what I really want to say, I mean, I would obviously love to share the experience because it's so incredible. It was the first Hubble launch. Whoa. And it was scrubbed, but nonetheless, getting there, it's the middle of the night, helicopters flying over, the lights on the pad, you're just like, it's like being in a movie. Mm-hmm. And then of course when it finally did go, and the reason I wanted to take a moment is because I just want to encourage anybody who's listening to this, get in the car and go, maybe not right now during COVID, but you saw Tim's reaction. Every one of us has a story about our first launch. This is so unbelievable. Just do it. Just go, especially if you have a kid or have a neighbor's kid or somebody who might be interested in this stuff. Just go. Camp out, stay up the night before, make a whole cool, memorable event for your kid, but do it.
I was that kid and I didn't even know it, believe it or not. I actually saw Hubble too. And I didn't realize it until just literally this year when I went down to Florida when I was 5 years old. And we went out and did the tour. We saw a space shuttle on the pad. Exciting. And then I remember going out, leaving our hotel room, just looking out and being able to see it from I think we may have either been in Orlando by then or just down in Cocoa Beach. But it was just like my dad's like, yep, cool. It was like the CIA. And I was very young, barely remember it. Recently realized when we looked at the dates that was the Hubble launch. And like, what are the odds of that, And so just in the back of my head, I've
always kind of remember. Or now it's like, wow, that must have had some kind of impact with me too, even way back then, and I didn't even know it, you know.
Oh, that's so interesting. It is. It's one of those bend the twig things. So I just want to encourage people to do it. So we're getting close to the end. So a good wrap up is looking ahead. Yeah. Tony, you want to ask what you were asking?
Yes, I'm sorry. I guess the developments with SN series, the Starship series, looks like a lot of stuff's developing. I mean, that whole factory they're building is growing so exponentially that there must be a lot of stuff coming up in the next few weeks.
It's really hard to tell what's going to happen when, because so many things are happening and so many things rely on something else happening before that thing happens, and it's just this giant Russian doll almost of 50 different things you have to unpack before you get to the one thing. But what I'm thinking we're going to see in the near future, I think even really soon, we should see, they actually had a serial number 7 little pressure test dome that will be testing a new alloy going out to the stand, and they'll fill it up with cryogenic propellant or cryogenic fluids, nitrogen, and test it to bursting, basically test it till it pops, see how it does, make sure it's good to go. And then I think we'll see we might see another flight 2 or 3 even of Starhopper or Star number SN5 and SM6, serial number 5 and 6. We might see a few more of those again, just so they can continue to really hone in on their procedures. And then I think, relatively soon, I don't want to put it, even guess on it too much, but I could see within a week within a month, maybe in September here, or for sure, hopefully by October, see serial number 8 roll out to the pad. And serial number 8 will be a substantial, adding more complication basically to this problem, to this solvable problem of how do you make Starship.
Well, it has fins and everything, right?
So this will have aero surfaces, the big finny flappy, I call them Elonerons because I don't know what else to call them. And it also it can support 3 Raptor engines as well.
There was some news about Raptor engines you were very excited about today, I saw.
Yeah, they posted, SpaceX tweeted us to a late night, Friday night tweet of a Raptor vacuum optimized Raptor engine. And I just was shocked that they're actually that far along in development, enough to be shipping it out the door basically and ready to start testing it, because I thought that was going to be, I guess a year has gone by already since the last presentation, or coming up on a year. But I just, for some reason, was thinking that was still a little bit further away. And seeing it in size, it is big, and that's going to be awesome. So it's really cool to see they're making progress in that front already too. Yeah.
I think an apt way to end is to take a little bit of a longer view to the future. I remember, and I don't know if you saw, Tim, the little promo we cut from our conversation, but in there is I could talk about Mars all day, and we haven't talked about Mars yet, but we don't have another hour to talk about. But for the folks who may not be aware, maybe more than part, Starship's reason to be has everything in the world with making us a multi-planetary species, as Elon Musk likes to say, and diversifying the opportunities for the survival of humankind. And so that has a vision for Mars. And we did touch on it a little bit earlier about, NASA maybe looking plans to 2030s. Do you have a crystal ball? You're pretty close to it all. What do you see? And then part 2, what do you want to see?
Okay, so keeping my eye on the prize here with Starship, there are a lot of big technologies that need to be demonstrated before Starship can go to Mars. A lot of big things. We're talking, they have to obviously be able to do that belly flop maneuver, because the re-entry profile is totally new, something we've never seen before for a rocket. They have to be able to build the super heavy booster and have all the tankage and all the ground support equipment for the world's biggest, most powerful rocket booster ever made. That all has to be done. The launch pad has to be done for that. They have to be able to do the in-orbit refueling of Starships. They have to have multiple tankers that can take off and land and refly over and over again, rendezvous and dock and refuel it and get it ready for Mars. I mean, there's a lot of steps and things that are totally unknown and unproven. And we know how the unknowns are always unknown. You know, you can't predict failures that you don't know exist yet, you know. So there could be a rocky road getting to the point where you actually have a system capable of getting itself and then eventually humans to Mars. And trying to predict that is like because so many things are just, once this step's done, you can go on to this step. You know, that's just the way the stuff is working. They're not even going to be working on, like, they're probably not even working on landing legs until they can understand that this works. You know what I mean? Like, it's like just totally iterative on one step after another. So at best, like, I would be shocked if they have an entire orbital system and the refueling figured out and all that stuff already for the 2024 window. That would be like, whoa, you know.
That would be whoa.
That's a major whoa for me. Elon he's still sticking to the 2022, but Elon time, so at least 2024, you know. But, you know, I would put a fair degree of, well, first off, I have to say I have the utmost confidence that they will figure it out and that they will make it happen, because that's just it's not, nothing they're doing is physically impossible. Nothing they're doing is, like, you know, laughably insane. It's just extremely difficult. It's big problems that need to be chipped away at. And they're solvable things. This is within the realm of humanity's understanding of physics. You know, it's not like we're relying on warp drives or anything ridiculous. So I do think 2026 would be a reasonable, like a realistic-ish timeline of an uncrewed lander, a Starship lander on Mars. And if they are capable of sending 2 or 4 there anyway to test it all out, why not get humans on board for the next window in 2028? I mean, but getting humans on board, flying all the mission itself to Mars will take 8 years to plan out and you know, have all the survivability and the habitation. So I think SpaceX would be ready to send humans, but to be able to you know, support human activity and have all that stuff figured out, radiation considerations, all those things, that I think will actually become the bigger linchpin or the bigger holdup in getting humans to Mars than the vehicle, which is shocking. I think that will actually be what pumps the brakes on the whole effort for a little bit.
Would you hop on any of his, would you want to take his trip around the moon? You know, would you go on any of these, or you want to watch from Earth?
I will watch. I used to be hardcore. I don't even want to do suborbital. I'm now to the point where I'm starting to see, you know, like Blue Origin's little New Shepard vehicle looking really cool. Virgin Galactic's interior looks amazing. I'm starting to now be like, maybe I could do suborbital flight just for fun. And then now I'm also seeing Bob and Doug successfully with with the orbital stuff to the International Space Station. I'm starting to be like, maybe before I die, I'd have interest in going, you know, on a week-long trip to space. But I'm still, and I don't think I'd want to go out to the moon, and I definitely don't want to go to Mars.
It's really the maybe someday astronaut.
Exactly. And a maybe someday.
I saw people on your feed a couple of days ago raising money to send you to Mars, and you were discouraged.
Like, stop! I don't want to go to Mars. Don't make me go.
How many T-shirts does it take to send him to Mars?
Jeez, yeah.
So before we say goodnight, is there anything you want to ask us? Because we peppered you with questions, and I know you were interested in asking us questions. You said right from the very start, and also in emails. And then lastly, anything you want to share? Any thoughts you want to leave with our audience?
Well, as far as asking questions, I'm just happy to have the contacts with you guys, so that when I'm in the middle of the night, I have some random question that I can't find answers to. I learn by asking questions. I'm just like professionally curious, basically. So that's that, and just listening to you guys' show is helping immensely. So I learned just by regurgitating and thinking, you know, just letting things go whoop, and hopefully some of it sticks, you know. And it was fun. It was really great hearing from you guys about Starlink too. So I greatly appreciate that insight. And I definitely need to reach out to you guys again. I will be doing a video in the near future. I'm doing a rocket pollution series, and part of rocket pollution is not only, you know, I did the air quality one earlier this year. I want to do one about space debris and light pollution as a consideration for the other one too. And then eventually a ground and sea consideration too. So I will definitely be reaching out to you guys as my experts about those considerations for astronomy. And that's great. But yeah, other than that, I am, the rest of this year is still looking fantastic spaceflight wise, and I'm probably just not going to sleep.
That's a perfect way to conclude the show, because yeah, it's so wonderful to have you join us, Tim. Your enthusiasm, I mean, it almost sounds a little pejorative to say your enthusiasm is so, you know, catching, but because it's so much deeper than that. I mean, your knowledge, your pursuit of it, your faith in it is really uplifting and informative and all those things. I think I might, if I can, Tony, steal from you. It's in this promo that we put out on social media that Tony was describing what it was like watching the first Saturn V launch. And Walter Cronkite was just beside himself and holding the window that was just, I mean, you if you've seen the footage, you know, they weren't quite planning for all those vibrations. And Tony said, I'm sorry, I'm going to steal your line, Tony, just because, you know, I'll attribute it to you that, you know, the rocket was cool, but it was he who brought it to life, really let us know what it felt like to really be there. And you really are doing the same for this generation, and such a tremendously needed voice and resource to all of us. So we are grateful to you for everything you're doing. We are grateful to you for coming tonight and to join us and stay up super late out there in Iowa. And we just want to say thank you again.